Shabbos Daf Lamed Gimel continues the brisa which lists various different averos that people may do and the punishment that comes from them. This takes us to a discussion about a certain disease called hydroken, and then another disease called askara, and why they come about. Along the way, the Gemara will mention that Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi is called Rosh Hashanah b'chol makom. The Gemara will explain why, and the Gemara will launch into the lengthy story of Rav Shimon bar Yochai and how he hid from the Romans in the cave and everything that happened involved with that. We will follow it all the way to the end of the story, which takes us midway through the next Amud and the next Mishnah. So the Gemara continues the brisa, which lists many different averos, sins that people can do, and the punishments that go along with it. So first on the list for today, we have the 3 averos of miscarriage of justice. That is, if the judges delay giving judgment even if they didn't have a reason to, and if they make a mistake because they're careless in judgment, and if they intentionally give a wrong decision because they favor one of the sides, or bittul Torah, people don't learn correctly. These 4 averos cause the following things. There will be an invasion in the land, and the enemy will plunder a lot of our things, and there will be plague, and that will cause hunger and famine, and people will eat, and they will not be full from what they eat. They will always be hungry. And food will be in such short supply that bread will be sold by weight. The Gemara explains that this means that bread will be made so poorly that it'll crumble in the oven, and the crumbs will have to be sold by the pound. Now, how do we know that these 4 averos cause these results? So the Gemara quotes from the Tochacha in Parshas Concise, which says the following things will happen. Evesi alechem cherev, I will bring upon you a sword. So that refers to the invasion and the plunder. And the hunger is because it says, B'shirvi lachem matei lechem, I'll break for you the stick of bread. And v'afu eser nashim, and 10 women will bake bread in one oven. It won't be enough for anybody, and there'll be a tremendous hunger in the land. Now, what reasons are given there? It says, Nekemes nekambris, is to avenge the Torah study that people didn't learn, and also it's because Yanu v'yanu b'mishpatai ma'asu, because you rejected my mishpatai. Now, mishpatai usually means mitzvahs, but it could also be interpreted as referring to justice. Because you rejected justice, these things happen. Okay, the Brisa goes further and says, for the following 3 averos which cause chil Hashem, the 3 averos of swearing falsely, causing Chil Hashem by a respectable person publicly doing things wrong, or Chil Shabbos, violating the Shabbos. Any of these 3 things cause the following things to happen. There will be an overpopulation of wild animals, and they will wipe out the population of domesticated animals, and people will become less. The human population will also decrease, and people will be afraid to travel on the roads. The roads will be deserted. Now, how do you know that these things come about because of these 3 sins? So the Gemara says all these 3 are described with the word chilul. It says b'chil Hashem, about chil Hashem it says v'leis chalalu Hashem kachi. Chil Shabbos it says mechalaleha ma'asimas. And about swearing falsely, it says leis yishavu b'shem elasherka v'chilalta Hashem alekecha. All these 2 things have the word chilul. Now, therefore, they're all connected, and we just need to find the source that one of them applies for these averos. So the pasuk that says in Mechukosai again, it says, you will read Be'ela as Ba'ala, with promises, with vows, meaning with swearing falsely. You don't listen to me, so swearing falsely will incur what things? It says, I will send the beasts of the field against you, and you'll be bereft of children, it'll destroy your livestock, diminish you, and your roads will become empty. So all these things are written by swearing falsely, and swearing falsely is linked to the other 2, Chil Hashem and Chil Shabbos. Now, the Brisa continues its list. It says, for murdering people, we end up with destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and the Shechina leaving Yisrael. How do you know? Because about murder it says, you should not bring a guilt upon the land, you shouldn't bring blood upon the land, and if you do, if you do not bring murder upon the land, you will not contaminate the land, and I am living within it. That implies that if you do contaminate the land with murder, then you will not be shechein ba, and I will not be shechein ba. I will not rest in it, and you will not rest in it. Okay, now having discussed murder, the Brisa continues and discusses the Avera of Gili Arayis, which is sexual immorality, and Avodas Kechavim, which is serving idols, Avodah Zarah. And also not keeping the rules of Shemitah and Yovel, not letting the land rest during the years of Shemitah and Yovel. So the Gemara says, what do you receive? What happens because of these? So we have to be sent into exile. Invaders will exile the inhabitants of the land. Not only Jews, this applies even to non-Jews. And then other people will come in and take over the land in their place. Now, what's the source of this? So, as far as sexual immorality, that it says clearly, it says the key is called all these abominations. After the list of the things we're not allowed to do, it says all these abominations were committed by the people here before you. The land became contaminated, and I remembered its punishment, and I threw them out. And then it says, if you don't do that, then the land will not throw you out, which clearly indicates that if you do that, then the land will throw you out, and you'll be exiled from the land. Now, what about idol worship? So on that it says, that if you do idol worship, I will throw your carcass on your idols. And then I will make your mikdash to be empty, and I will scatter you amongst the nations. So again, exile is caused by idol worship. Now, what about Shemitah and Yovel? So there it says, that once the Jews will be in exile, then the land which will be empty will get back its Shemitah years that it was supposed to rest, that it didn't get a chance to rest. It will recover it. And it says, that the recovery for the lost Shemitah years will be when Klal Yisrael is thrown out of Eretz Yisrael. That's when the land will rest, and it is claiming its due, and that is therefore one of the reasons why Klal Yisrael was thrown out. Now the Brisa continues and discusses what happens to people who speak with rude or obscene language. And it says, before the sin of nivlos peh, obscene language, so terrible things happen, and harsh decrees are decreed against the Jews. Young Jewish men pass away, and orphans and widows cry out, and there's nobody to answer them. And what's the source for this? Because it says, Hashem will not be happy with the young men. He will not have mercy on the orphans. And what's the reason for this? Everybody does evil and they're hypocrites, and the mouths speak obscenities. His anger is not turned away, his hand is still outstretched. Now the Gemara wants to know, what is this last line, his hand is still outstretched? The Gemara says, you should read it as and forever, for all eternity, his hand is outstretched, meaning people will suffer because of this for eternity, which doesn't literally mean eternity, it means for 70 years. 70 years is often called an eternity. The Gemara says, what's it referring to? Where it says, Rav Chanan bar Rava said that everybody knows why a bride goes into a chuppah, why she gets married, and what happens after the wedding. However, if anybody perverts his speech to actually say something about it, that's called nivlos apeh, and he will get a gzar din, a decree of 70 years. Even if he had a positive decree, a favorable decree for 7 years, it'll be reversed, and it'll end up with a negative, evil decree of 70 years. Now the Gemara says further, Rabbi Shila said in the name of Chizda, anybody who speaks obscenely, they make Gehenim deeper for him. Like it says, Shucha Amuka Pizari is a deep pit for the mouth that speaks badly. Nachman bar Yitzchak said, even somebody who just listens and doesn't object also gets stuck in that, because it says, Hashem yipol Shem, somebody who is abhorred by Hashem will fall there, which means even somebody who just stood idly by, there's another person besides the speaker. Now the Gemara discusses a similar idea, which also takes us into a discussion of a disease called hydrokin, and the Gemara will spend some time discussing what brings that. So Rav Oshaya says, anybody who cleans his schedule out so that he has time to do Averis will end up with wounds and welts breaking out upon the body. Like it says, Chaburas Petza Tamrak Bara. There will be injuries and wounds for somebody who cleans the schedule, clears his schedule in order to do evil. Not only that, but he also gets a disease called hydrokin. Now, hydrokin is not clear what that is. Some kind of swelling of the body. The Gemara will describe it. The Gemara says, like it says, what's the source of the get hydrokin? Like it says, Umaka is chadre ivotin. He'll get ailments of the inner parts of the stomach. I guess it's swelling of the stomach here. Now the Gemara brings a few Amoraim who discuss hydrokin. Nachman bar Yitzchak said, How do you know that somebody did Averas? Again, Avera usually refers to sexual immorality. It's because he did hydrokin. Now the Gemara brings a brisa. 3 sources, 3 possible reasons a person could be struck with hydrokin. One of them was because of Averas that he did, but that you could tell. That's if he has thickened skin. Somebody could get hydrokin even if he just didn't eat for a while, if he's hungry. But that kind of hydrokin comes from swelling of the body. And somebody who was struck with hydrokin because some sorcerer cast a spell on him, he ends up having thin skin. 3 different types of hydrokin with different symptoms. Now the Gemara talks about different Amoraim who had different types of hydrokin. The Gemara says Shmuel HaKatan had it, and he was afraid people would think that it was because of Averas that he did, because they may not know the symptoms of the Avera one. So he said, Hashem, people are going to think I did Averas, they won't realize. So he was healed. And when Abaye had it, and Rava said, I know that Abaye didn't have it because of an Averas. Abaye deprives himself of food he doesn't eat, and that's why he got it, because he was not properly fed. That's also a reason. Now the Gemara says that Rava himself had hydrokin. Now the Gemara says this is not understandable. Rava obviously knew the reasons for hydrokin. He said he knew that Abaye was struck with it because he didn't eat. And Rava elsewhere said that people get hydrokin if they hold themselves in from using the restroom when they have to. So if he's such an expert in hydrokin, how did he get it? So he says because when he used to give shir, he needed to use the restroom, but it was not respectful to leave in the middle of the shir, and therefore he would often have to hold himself in, and therefore he got the disease. The Gemara now lists 4 types of indicators that a person has been guilty of certain types of mistakes and averos. We'll begin with hydrokin and we'll end with askara, and then the Gemara will launch into a discussion of what askara is and how it is caused. So the Brisa says as follows. Somebody who has hidrokan, so that's an indicator of sexual impropriety. Sinas chinam, hating people for no reason, that causes jaundice, yellowed skin. Arrogance causes being poor, and lashon hara causes askara. Askara is a disease which begins in the intestinal tract and it ends up spreading to the throat and causes a person to die via strangulation. We consider it to be a very horrible affliction. So now the Gemara quotes a brisa which elaborates on askara and what causes askara. So the Gemara says, first of all, what is the cause of askara? So the Chachamim say askara comes to the world because people don't take off meiser. They end up eating a meiser that they're not supposed to, or they end up eating food without meiser taken from it. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Yossi, says it becomes because of lashon hara. The Gemara brings a source from this. It's either Rava or Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and it says, "V'hamelach yismach be'Elokim, the king shall rejoice in God, yishal kol hanishba b'y, and everyone who swears truthfully by him will be glorified. Ki yisacher pi davrei shaker." That's the line we need. Yisacher is like the word askara. Pi davrei shaker, the mouth that speaks mistakes. So you see that by somebody speaking improperly, he will be struck with yisacher, he'll be struck with askara, and that proves that lashon hara causes askara. Now the Gemara says, hold on a second. Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi said that it's askara is caused by lashon hara. Is that the only cause, or does he also agree to the Chachamim that it's caused by people who don't take meiser? So the Gemara answers that he agrees, and really he's saying that it can be caused by either thing. The Gemara quotes a lengthy brisa, and in the brisa, Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi himself says that askara is caused by not taking meiser, and that'll be the proof. So let's see the brisa at length. The brisa says, when the Chachamim were thrown out of Yerushalayim by the Roman Empire, and they went to Yavne, and they set up a yeshiva there, which they called Kerem B'Yavne, the vineyard Yavne, because the Talmidim sat in rows like vines in the vineyard. So when they were there, so it was this discussion between Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. The question was, why is it that askara starts in the stomach and then it extends up to the mouth and the throat? Somewhere has a few answers here. First of all was Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi, which the Gemara calls Rosh Medabrim B'chol Makom, the first one to speak in every situation. So he said the reason is because speech starts in the inside. It is the heart and the kidneys that first think about what to say, and then it is the tongue that speaks it, and it is the mouth that concludes the shaping of the speech. So you see, evil speech, which is what causes askara, begins in the insides, and it stretches, it ends in the mouth, and that's why the disease follows that progression. Second Tana says, and this is Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi, because people eat non-kosher things. Umar says non-kosher things. You would not get the death penalty for eating something that's not kosher. So the Gemara says not just any non-kosher things. He's talking about food that did not have meiser taken from it, which is clear that incurs the death penalty. And this is our proof, because here he says clearly things which do not have meiser taken from them. So he certainly agrees that is also true. Now, what did Reb Shimon say? Reb Shimon said that the reason why askara starts in the inside and ends in the mouth is because it comes for people who do not learn Torah properly. And that's also something that affects the inside and the mouth. The mouth doesn't speak the words of Torah. Now the Gemara quotes the end of the Brisa, which challenges Reb Shimon. Chachamim said to him, how could you say that the reason for askara is because people don't learn? But what about women? Women sometimes get askara and they don't have a mitzvah to learn. They're allowed to learn if they want to, but there's nothing wrong if they don't. So Reb Shimon answered, because they interfere with their husband's learning. So I said, but what about the goyim? They sometimes get askara and they have no mitzvah to learn. Reb Shimon said, because they interfere with Jews' learning. So I said, what about children? They don't have an obligation to learn. Reb Shimon says, because they interfere with their father's learning. He says, what about children who are in school all day? They, obviously, there's no sin, they're under bar mitzvah, so you can't blame them, but they don't interfere with their father's learning because they're in school. Somebody says it's like Rav Gurion said, or maybe it was Rav Yosef, the son of Rishmai, who said it, in every generation there are tzaddikim, or there are children that are ensnared as punishment for the sins of the generation. If there are no tzaddikim, then it's the children who are, and that's how it works. The Gemara says, what is the pasuk that proves that? If you do not know where to graze your sheep, O most beautiful of women, says the pasuk, follow the footsteps of the sheep, and graze your young goats, your kids, amongst the dwellings of the shepherds. So the Gemara understands Gideyayach al Mishkan Yisrael to mean that the children are Mishkan, they are the Mashkan, they're collateral for the sins of the shepherds, meaning that the children are taken instead of the adults. And that sometimes happens when the generation is doing wrongly. Okay, so that's the end of that discussion. Now, the Gemara had referred to the fact that Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi was called Rosh Medabrim B'chol Malkim. The Gemara wants to know why that's so, and now the Gemara introduces the lengthy story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's conflict with the Roman Empire. And so the Gemara relates that Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai were all sitting together, and sitting there as well was a person by the name of Yehuda ben Gerim, as a machlokes rishonim whether he was a respectable individual or he was somewhat of a bum. Anyway, the discussion was that Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi said, how wonderful are the deeds of the Romans. They do so many good things for us. They establish marketplaces, they build bridges for us, and they establish bathhouses. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yehuda said in favor of the Romans. Rabbi Yossi was quiet. He didn't respond. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, however, said that's not correct. He said everything that they did only for themselves, didn't do anything for us. The marketplaces are in order for them to be able to place prostitutes there. The bathhouses are for them to beautify themselves, and the bridges are for them to collect tolls. Now, Yehuda ben Gerim, who was sitting there, then went and he either maliciously or not related this to others, and it came to the ears of the Roman Empire, and they were not too pleased about it. So they said Yehuda Bar Eloi, who spoke in favor of the Romans, should be elevated, and therefore he becomes the one who speaks first in all situations. That's why the Gemara earlier called him Rosh HaMedabrim B'chol Malkim. Rabbi Yossi was quiet, was exiled to the town of Tzipori, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai has the death penalty set upon him. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar went away and hid. First they hid in the Beis Medrash. And Rabbi Shimon's wife and Rabbi Elazar's mother would bring them bread and water every day, and that's what they would eat to sustain themselves while they learned. However, at some point the decree intensified and the manhunt got more intense, and Rabbi Shimon said he was afraid that his wife would be caught and tortured, so he said, you know what, we're going to go somewhere else, I'm not going to tell her. So they went and they hid in the cave. That's the famous cave in Miron where Rabbi Shimon and his son hid. So they went there and they hid in the cave, and they didn't have any food, didn't have any water. So it was a miracle. A tree, a charuva tree, a carob tree grew, and a spring of water was created, and that's what they ate and drank. Now the Gemara says, what did they do? They stayed there for a while, and they didn't want their clothes to wear out. So they took off their clothes and they hid themselves in sand up to their necks. They buried themselves, and then they would discuss Torah all day long, except for the time of Tefillah. Then they would get out of the sand and they would dress. That way the clothing would not wear out and it would last them for a while. This is what they did for 12 years. After 12 years, the Caesar, he expired, he died, and the rule was that when the Caesar is finished, all his decrees are annulled. So somebody needed to come and tell Rav Shimon and his son that the decree for his life was annulled. So Eliyahu stood at the entrance to the cave and he said, who's going to tell Rav Shimon Bar Yochai that the decree is gone? So they heard and they left the cave. So they went back into civilization, but they were uplifted through 12 years of learning and doing nothing else to such a high level that they couldn't stand the world the way it was. They went out into the world and they saw somebody plowing a field and planting a field, and Rav Shimon said, what kind of business these people could be learning? Instead they're busy wasting their time with earning a livelihood with things for this world. So everywhere Rav Shimon and his son looked, they caused whatever they saw to be incinerated. So a voice came out of Shemayim and said, what are you doing? You came out of your cave to destroy the world. Go back to your cave. So the two went back to the cave and stayed there another 12 months. After 12 months, they said, listen, the worst Russian Gehenna is only there for 12 months, so probably our decree has also been annulled. And indeed, a voice came out of heaven and said, okay, you can go out of the cave. So they came out of the cave again. But Rebbe Lazar, the son, was still a little tough, and everywhere he saw things, he destroyed it with his fiery gaze, but Reb Shimon was able to heal it with his eyes. And Reb Shimon said to Rebbe Lazar, it's enough that there's you and I in the world, not everybody in the world has to be on the level. Okay, they went further, and it was late Friday afternoon, and Reb Shimon and his son saw an old man carrying 2 bundles of hadassim, and he was running. So they stopped him, they said, what's this for? And he said, it's the Kavod Shabbos, to honor Shabbos, so I want the house to smell nice. So they said, but why 2? He said, well, one for Zachar, one for Shomer, one connected the word Zachar, which was used in the Aseres HaDibros to introduce the mitzvahs asay of Shabbos, and one for the word Shomer, which is used to introduce the mitzvahs asay of Shabbos. So Rav Shimon said, look how beautiful Klal Yisrael is, that they cherish the mitzvah so dearly and they celebrate so finely every single word. They have a special thing for it. Okay, now the Gemara continues. The Gemara says that eventually Rav Shimon went to greet Rav Pinchas ben Yair, who was his son-in-law, and they met and they went to the bathhouse in Tveria, and Rav Shimon was massaging his flesh there because it was all cracked and wounded because of all the years in the sand. So when Rav Pinchas saw that, he began to cry, and the tears dripped into the skin and fell in the cracks, but they were salty and it hurt. So Rav Shimon shrieked. So Rav Pinchas said, "Oy veiz mir, that I have to see you like this." And Rav Shimon said, "No, you're lucky to see me like this because these are what I earned. Through the agony of these, I have arrived at such great knowledge in Torah that I didn't have before." The Gemara explains what does that mean, because before, in the old days, before the cave, Rav Pinchas ben Yair would ask Rav Shimon ben Yochai 12. He would ask him, before Rav Shimon ben Yochai would ask Rav Pinchas ben Yair a question, and Rav Pinchas ben Yair would offer 12 answers. But now after the cave, Rav Pinchas would ask a question, and Rav Shimon ben Yochai will give 24 answers. And the Gemara continues, and the Gemara says that Rav Shimon realized that a miracle had happened to him. He was sustained, and he survived the decree, and he decided that he should do something for the community in order to give back. Now, the Gemara says, where did he get that from? From Yaakov. The Gemara says, when Yaakov arrived intact after meeting Esav, he wanted to do something, and therefore he was intact in his money, in his health, and in his Torah. So it says, Vayichan Espanei Eir, he encamped in front of the city. Rav says that means that he did things for the city. He established a new coin, or he built marketplaces, or he built bathhouses for them. Okay. Now, Rav Shimon said, therefore I'm going to do something as well. He was in the city of Tveria, so he asked the leaders there, is there anything here that needs fixing? So they said, yeah, there's a place where the main road goes through a field, which is not clear if it's a cemetery or not, or if there are graves there, and Kahanim can't travel. They have to go all the way around on a very circuitous route. So Rav Shimon said, okay, I'm going to figure out where the graves are. So first of all, he said, do we know if this is a cemetery or not? Is there anybody who remembers a Talmid Chacham ever walking through here or doing Torah things here? So it was an old man who said, yeah, Rav Yechon ben Zakkai was a Kayin, came here and he planted Tormisei, a type of fruit, and he planted Truma fruit. So you see that there was definitely a Torah area at some time. So Rav Shimon went around and he figured out which area were graves, and he marked them so the Kohanim could walk everywhere else. Now, it's not clear here how he accomplished that. The Gemara over here just says because the ground was soft. In Yerushalmi it says that he was able to cause the corpses to rise to the surface, and then he was able to see where they were, and he marked it off. Now, the old man who was involved, was not pleased. And he said, look, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai made a cemetery tahor. So Rav Shimon said, you cannot say things like that, because that is particularly troublesome. Because you were there, you were involved, and people see that you were saying negative things about it, they're going to think that it really wasn't correct. Now, you should know that even the prostitutes take care of each other. They show each other professional courtesy to that extent. But you would expect that a Talmid Chachamim should at least be able to do that. But here you are starting up with me. So, Rav Shimon felt that he was chayiv misa. The Gemara says he put his eyes upon him and he died. Later, Rav Shimon went in the marketplace and he met Yehuda ben Gerim, the one who started this whole thing. And he said, oh, this guy's still around. He put his eyes on him and he became a heap of bones.